Go. Well, welcome again to our midweek interview time, and it's a great privilege to have Todd Funk with me from Thinking Matters. So welcome, Todd.
Hey, it's good to be here, Mike, and make your acquaintance.
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd just introduce yourself to us, just share a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay, definitely. So, yeah, again, my name is Todd Funk, and my wife, Dawn, and I we're obviously from the United States. We've been in New Zealand since 2004, about, 17, 18 years, whatever that works out to be. We came to do ministry work. I was a high school science teacher there before in the States. We've got two children. They're kids. They're 30 and 29. One's in Australia and one's still here. And we do a lot of work with children's Bible ministry stuff and Bible and school programs. I also do kids camps down in Ragland. But I'm also involved with a ministry called Thinking Matters. That's a New Zealand-based apologetic ministry. And its job at Thinking Matters, we encourage New Zealand Christians to explore not just what they believe, but why they believe it, and trying to encourage them to share their faith with confidence and with gentleness and respect.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your journey into the faith. What brought you to Jesus?
Well, so I was brought up in a Christian household since about age 10 or 11. And so my faith back then was a bit shallow and a kind of bit unrooted and really untested, if you will. Like most other Christians that grow up, we go to Sunday school, go to youth group, etc. And I got told what to believe, but not necessarily why to believe it and why it's rational and reasonable to believe such things. Fast forward, when I was at University of California, Irvine, in the 80s, 84, 85, I went through a backsliding period through college, my last years of college, high school, and then into university. And it wasn't until my third year university that I kind of like Solomon, came to the conclusion, vanity, all is vanities. I wasn't happy doing my own thing, living selfishly, living for the pleasures of this world. So I recommitted my life back to Christ back then. And of course, well, not of course, but I was a biology major. And so during that time, a lot of evolutionary dogma and jargon was being crammed down my throat. But even though I was in a backslidden state, Mike, I was taking small bites and a lot of it didn't make sense. And so it kind of set me on a journey of really exploring Darwinian evolution and finding the merits or the problems with it, the shortcomings with it. Well, fast forward to here in New Zealand in 2012, that was Darwin's 200th anniversary birthday. And our pastor up here at Harborside Church, Martin Steele, he says, why don't we do like a 3-part Sunday night thing on Darwinism? And so me and another guy put it together and did it. And that was kind of the start of me realizing that apologetics, what the term means is just defending the faith, that apologetics had a place in the body of Christ, that my intellect, I'm not saying I'm an intellectual giant or anything, but I'm an intellectual thinker. I'm a deep thinker, Mike, that my intellect had a part to play in my Christianity. I began to develop that series. I put up a DVD now. It's called The Darwin Delusion, and it tells the scientific shortcomings and problems of Darwinian evolution. But I've since, met Rodney Lake with Thinking Matters and ventured out into that. And really, God has married two ministries that I'm with, kids ministry and apologetics. And it's helped me. One has helped me with the other. I always try and put apologetics into kids' ministry so they don't just think of the Bible stories as just stories and fairy tales. I try and put apologetic truth. This has really happened, and this is how logically you can know the resurrection happened, for instance. But then also with kids' ministries, it's helped me to be able to communicate difficult and abstract truth to adults and bring in humor and gestures and life to it. And so it's been a win-win for me, a marriage of ministries that I wouldn't have thought when I left the United States in 2004. I came to do university campus evangelism. I still do a tiny bit of that, but my heart is really knit towards younger, more open audiences. So that's been kind of my journey up to this point.
Yeah. A lot of us, during lockdown are going to have some contacts with our neighbors. Yeah. And, there's some real issues for a lot of people is how do we actually initiate conversations of faith? And have you got any tips for us when those conversations start to be engaged?
Yeah, well, and again, just based on my own life experiences back in the United States, I used to head up a cold call evangelism thing. We went on Saturdays, we went on knocking on doors and stuff in the neighborhoods with very, very, even back then in the 80s, very limited, or 90s was it, very limited acceptance, very limited success rate with that stuff. But I kind of think, Mike, that kind of open air and door-to-door cold call evangelism, those have seen their day. The buzzword now is organic conversations and organic evangelism. And so starting there, I agree with organic, meaning conversations they should flow natural. But even though our conversations with our neighbor, or the person who trims our hair, the checkout person at the grocery store, they should be natural, but I think they should, on our behalf, be purposeful, kind of a guided conversation. Not because we as Christians have a hidden agenda of any sort, but just for me personally, I want conversational topics that matter. The All Blacks are cool, the weather is cool, coronavirus, we've all talked about it until we're blue in the face. But what about something that really matters? You know, is there an eternity? Is there a God? Have you ever had a relationship with God? And so I see my conversations with my neighbor. I got a neighbor over here named Mike, kind of like building a bridge. If you're building a bridge, your first plank, just imagine like a small, narrow place, and you've got to build a bridge across to get a backpack, a heavy backpack of truth across it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, your first plank, you're not going to take that whole backpack across that thing. You're going to snap the plank and fall in. So maybe you just go across it just with you. You put the plank, you go across it, you talk to your neighbor about the All Blacks and the COVID and whatever, come back, and each time you lay another plank so you can bring another something out of your backpack of truth. And eventually you can get that whole backpack over, but one trip at a time. A guy named Greg Kokel says, it's like putting a pebble in someone's shoe. If you've ever been walking or camping or hiking, tramping, and you get a pebble in your shoe, it's really annoying. And you think, oh my goodness, you take your shoe off expecting a boulder to roll out, and there goes a little teeny tiny pebble. It's annoying. Truth can be that way in the lives of all of us. We've all heard a sermon or heard somebody say one thing, and your mind went off and you left the sermon or whatever, not Pastor Mike's sermon, of course, but other people's sermon. Now, your mind wanders, and that truth just pierces your heart, and your life's just not right until you process it, until you act on it. And gospel truth works the same way. One word of gospel truth, one challenging truth in the life of people can make their walk without Christ a lot less comfortable. So you don't have to dump the whole dump truck of truth on them. Just a pebble in their shoe sometimes is good.
So what's an opening kind of question, Todd? When you're with a neighbor, I mean, how do you open up? What's a good opening questions?
Yeah, well, for me, I take my cue from Ray Comfort. He's a Kiwi out of Christchurch that used to do open air, and I believe you know him. But he came to the United States, Southern California, where I'm from, and I went to a few of the church meetings where he was, and even struck up a friendship with him. But I love his suggestion. He asked people, do you have a church or religious background of any sort? And I found that to be disarming, and I found that to be an open-ended question, and I found it to be a question that people don't bristle at. They either do or they don't. And it's just, I'm asking them about their background. I'm not saying, what would happen to you if you died tonight? That's a bit confrontational. But just, do you have a church or religious background of any sort? This is kind of after they ask about my life, or they realize, or again, you purposely kind of shift the conversation a little bit to get to that point. And that usually opens up a pretty good conversation and dialogue.
Okay. So what are some of the, like when people come back at you, sometimes they just make big statements. Yeah. And, you get the temptation with saying, hey, hold on, you're really wrong there. Sometimes that approach really works. So how can you actually put the onus back on the person to answer the questions themselves?
Yeah, well, some people think of apologetics as arguments, winning an argument. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's with gentleness and respect, defending the faith as cogent, as coherent, as logical, and as consistent. And two questions that I got, they're not my own. They came from a book called Tactics by Greg Kokel. They're, what do you mean by that? And how do you come to that conclusion? And so if somebody, for instance, says, all religions are basically the same, well, you could start on a 10 to 50 minute tirade on a miniature class on world religions. But it would do much more good to say, well, what exactly do you mean by that? That they all come to the same conclusion, that they all, have the same God in mind, they have the same moral value, or they're all, equally mythical or fairy tale-ish. So get them to define exactly what they mean by that is the first question. And then the second one, if they say, well, all religions basically teach this the same thing, then you pursue with the second question. Well, how did you come to that conclusion? You see, this gets them to think about their worldview. Francis Schaeffer, a very famous apologist evangelist, he said, if I only had an hour to spend with somebody, I'd spend the first 55 minutes asking questions and the last 5 minutes sharing with them about, my faith or whatever. And some people would think, well, what a waste of time. But the questions do several things. They dignify the person. You're not just there to put another evangelistic notch on your belt. It shows them that you care, that you're interested, but it's also a diagnostic for us to figure out, what are they thinking? Where did and how did they come to their worldview? How did they come to that point of view? And it puts the onus on them where it needs to be. If they make a claim that all religions are basically the same, well, you could try and defend that, but you don't need to defend that. They need to explain that, really. And so it's, well, how did you come to that conclusion? What drew you to that? And then you could begin the dialogue. And it gives you a chance when they're talking to think about the logic or the inconsistency of what they're saying.
Great. And tell us a good sort of genuine way out when somebody does ask you a question and you simply do not know the answer. And so rather than, do you recommend trying scrambling, or what do you do?
3 magical words: I don't know. That shows humility. That shows that you're not the Bible answer man, the know-it-all. And so many times Christians can tend to come off like that I need to know everything there is about economics and politics and homeschooling and everything else, including the Bible, and come off as having our lives perfect together. Whereas in reality, Mike, let's face it, we're all on a journey in these things. And so it shows a humility. And it gives an opportunity, I'm not sure about that, Mike. I've never heard that objection. Can I get back with you? What have I just done? I've opened the door for another opportunity to lay another plank on that bridge and walk across with a little bit more truth. And it helps us sharpen our faith. If we're having keen conversations out there, we are going to come across questions we don't have answers to. When we find those answers, I know for me, it's always had the effect of strengthening my faith. Like, I do have a coherent faith. I do have a faith and a worldview that's actually true. So we search these things out, and there's answers to all the questions out there, or all the big ones. And then guess what? The next time that comes around, you'll have that in your repository of truth in your head, and you'll be able to give an answer for the reason, for the hope that's within you, with gentleness, with respect.
And what's important about telling your own personal story?
Well, again, especially with millennials, this generation, everything's your story. Everything's a dialogue and part of a story. And while people, they might be able to refute or contradict or accuse the facts you're giving them of being false or overinflated and bloated or whatever, but when you look someone in the eye and say, I once was blind, but now I see, and you say that with conviction and sincerity, and of course, I'm metaphorically speaking, like the blind man that was healed. But when you say that, it sinks right into their heart. It gives them a window of view into your heart and what Jesus Christ has done for you. Our testimony is powerful in bringing people to Christ and bringing an awareness of Christ and bringing a reality. This is not just an abstract bunch of facts that I have in my head. This is a life-changing experience with a living God, Jesus Christ. So never neglect or shy away from your testimony, no matter how intellectual you are and want to go.
Thanks for that. The other question, of course, is some of the objections that people may have towards the God story, and they may use the COVID as an excuse to try and, to dish our story. What are some of the objections that you're finding are out there at the moment?
Yeah, well, I haven't come across it personally, but I know it's out there on the internet and it's the old problem of evil. if we really had, if there is a loving God, how does he allow X, Y, Z in coronavirus? And kind of again, the honest response is, first of all, I can't explain it all. I don't know why. I don't have all the answers, but a partial truth to that is that we do live in a fallen world. The way things are now are not the way things were in the beginning. It's not God's intentional, original intent, and they're certainly not the way things are going to be. We read about this in the Bible, that God, in one day there will be no more sorrow, no more tears, no more sickness. These will be done away with. But we, in many ways, we in the earth are suffering the consequences of a fallen world. And by fallen world, I mean a sinful world, a world in which men have chosen to go their own way, do their own thing, starting with Adam and up to current with me. I do these things every day. And sometimes we pay the consequences. Sometimes stuff happens around us. Sometimes we can only in time look back on things and say, wow, I can see, even though God doesn't cause that, I can see a redemptive purpose. I can see a positive purpose or outcome in that. I'm putting together a devotional for my own church that I go to. And it's going to be something like the new normal. I don't want the new normal to look like the old normal. I want to find what God is teaching me through this and pull out the good of this. I think we're more connected and more related through this, and realizing people can connect very easily, very instantly across the seas with Skype and Zoom and other things. And also to remember, our brothers, we're not islands. Our brothers will need us and we need them. And so I'm going to grab what's good out of this thing, take it and run with it afterwards. But the long answer to that short question is just living in a fallen world. There's all kinds of things that are not right, not the way they were meant to be, and not the way they're going to be.
Okay. Well, that's been fantastic. Just as we leave, are there any apologetic materials that you've found really helpful? Like, we've got parents who could be watching this with kids and wanting to train them up in the way, in the faith, and helping them be equipped.
Yeah, actually there is, and it's just hot off the press with me. Rodney Lake at Thinking Matters, one of our last regional meetings, he let us all grab a bunch of books for free. And so I grabbed a bunch of books for free, and one of them was called Mama Bear Apologetics. Mamas being like the mama bear, the protectors of the family and whatnot. Very good book. And it teaches moms how to be just that, the mama bear, because let's face it, even if you're a homeschooler, at some point, Johnny, Susie, they're going to go out into the world, and they're going to, they don't have to go out in the world. They have to click on YouTube. They have to watch a video or a Netflix program, and they're going to get a worldview coming their way. They're going to get fed lies and lots of isms that are subtly masked and disguised. And this book teaches them some strategy how to I make the analogy to take little bites. If you're eating a fish that's really small and bony, it might be good fish, but you take little bites and you spit out the bones. And with these movies, with these YouTube videos, with these whatever, there's going to be some good stuff in there, and we could recognize and embrace that, but you got to spit out the bones of truth. And so it teaches moms and dads, but it's Mama Bear Apologetics. It teaches them how to recognize these false worldviews, how to search them out and find them with their kids. And it's kind of a built-in devotional time. What happened today at school, Johnny? What was that movie about? And then taking it down, breaking down the false, ungodly worldviews and replacing them with the truth. And it's getting the kids to not just giving them a fish, but teaching them how to fish. How do we decipher truth from error? And how do we, discover those worldviews? So again, it's called Mama Bear Apologetics.
That's fantastic. Hey, look, we've had a great time together, and I really appreciate all the insights you've given, and I think that'll be really helpful. And so may God bless you in your ministry, and I hope we'll be able to connect again soon.
Yeah, I would like it. And if we want to do this again, I'm more than happy to do it.
Okay. Thanks very much, Todd. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.
You too, Mike.